Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. You know, we hear a lot about influencer marketing, but what exactly is it? It's basically a type of social media marketing that uses endorsements and product mentions from people with influence. They either have a large social media following or they're viewed as experts in their industry or niche. Our guest today is an expert on this very topic. Kerry Perse is the founder of Influence and Inspire Consulting. She's here to tell us how to get started in influencer marketing.
Okay, now I have to insert something here.
Okay.
In the vein of full disclosure, Kerry actually used to work at our company. And I have to tell this one story. Before I interviewed Kerry when she worked here, I got a resume and she had a reference there because she worked at Perkins. This is going to be embarrassing to her. So that's why I'm adding this.
Well, everybody starts somewhere.
Right. She was in college. She worked at Perkins and it was like for 4 years. And I'm like, wow, that's impressive. You know, that somebody could put up with Perkins for 4 years. So I called the reference at 10 to 12 at, like noon on a Tuesday, and this woman that answers the phone, was not happy, because it's 10 to 12 at a Perkins on a Tuesday. And she goes, Kerry Perse? Yeah. She's the best employee I ever had. You'd be an idiot not to hire her. Click. So I think I hired you right at the interview, correct?
You did.
Because I didn't want to be the idiot. I wanted to prove myself that.
You want to be on the Perkins Wall of Shame.
Right.
Well, anyway, thanks for joining us, Kerry. It's great to have you on here. What have you been doing since Perkins, and how did you end up in New York?
Well, you're right. It's only been a few years, Nancy.
Right.
But since I was a waitress, I did actually have a career in marketing. So as Dan mentioned, I worked for him for a few years in Milwaukee. I also worked at another company in Milwaukee focused on web design. And then I moved out to New York about 15 years ago. And so since that time, I've worked at a variety of different agencies. I've always kind of been an agency person, but I've worked at creative, media, social, tech.
Wow.
I know. It's been a good ride. It's been a good ride.
Boy, you've done just about everything.
And you achieved one of your goals, because I remember that from the interview too. He says, I want to live somewhere where I don't need to own a car. So you moving to New York was no shock.
Yeah. No car. Only public transportation. I didn't have very good luck with cars. Someone was always hitting my car. So.
Right.
Ouch. How did you get into influencer marketing?
I've always liked to kind of learn and focus on new marketing disciplines. And I really got into it when I was working at a full service social media agency. So this was like way before Facebook changed the algorithm and we could just kind of send product or pitches to different influencers and maybe give them a little bit of money. And then they would post to all their followers, about the brands that we were working with. And I thought it was so cool that influencers were both media as well as people, as well as content creators. And so I think that it was just very interesting to me to learn more about it.
How do you work with your clients in this niche now? Tell us a little bit about your new consulting firm.
Yeah, no, it's been good. So I focus both on creating strategy, right? So helping brands or agencies create influencer strategy. I also help organizations with capability development. So if you want to start an influencer practice, evolve your influencer practice, or specific capabilities around influencer, I've also been kind of helping different organizations do that as well. So when you do the strategic work product, it's helping brands identify what role influencers can play in their marketing mix, how they want to show up, how they want to partner with brands, setting some KPIs, and then, really working with them to figure out the best type of influencer, the best type of content, and then, actually execute the programs.
So who do you think does this really well right now?
I think there are tons of brands that have really embraced influencer marketing and have gotten very good at it. And they're in all different categories. So there's kind of an athletic apparel company called Outdoor Voices. They do an exceptional job of having influencers create content that's both approachable but aspirational at the same time. Nordstrom's has done a tremendous job. They have, a very dedicated stable of influencers that I think is responsible for driving the vast majority of their sales in mobile. like virtually any indie beauty brand does a great job. And I was I was reading recently an interesting case study. So there is a group of dedicated influencers in New Zealand that love Kmart. And Kmart doesn't
Does it still
even pay them.
exist? Is it?
Is Kmart
It
in
does in
Australia?
New
Does?
Zealand.
Okay. Oh, in
Oh.
New Zealand it exists. Okay.
And so they don't, Kmart does not pay them. They don't even give them their clothes. These women have like forged this bond about going to Kmart and finding great accessible fashion. And then it is purely organic. And so they've done a really great job of taking their loyal customers and giving them a great platform to share their brand on.
So how do you determine if influencer marketing is right for you? I mean, do you have to find the influencer first? Do you have to just say, I want to do this and you can just find them? How does it work?
Or is there a type of industry that works better doing that than others?
Right.
You know, I actually think influencer marketing has matured to the point where it can be a tool used for almost any category or industry. Where I usually like to start with different clients is taking a look at what the brand is trying to communicate with the marketplace. So what are their key messages? And when you look at each of their key messages, is it one that the brand alone can communicate? Or is it one that would be best communicated by both an influencer and the brand, or an influencer alone? So influencers can often help shift perception, help people understand why it may be a brand for them, why it might fit into their lifestyle. And so it's more about what the brand is trying to accomplish and what they're trying to communicate. And then once you establish the need for influencers, you can then begin to build out a strategy that works for them.
So once you know that this is something you want to do, what's your process?
So I always like to take what I call an audience first approach to planning influencers. So once you've, established the need, you really take a look at who your high value consumer or professional target is, understand who are the people that influence them, where do they consume their content, what are they interested in, a bunch of different data points that would help kind of inform how you shape your messaging communicated by the influencers, and then also who the influencers are that you want to work with. And so once you get a good sense of the type of content you want them to create and the profile or the type of influencer you want to work with, there's a bunch of tools you can use that almost operate like an influencer search engine that allow you to really dig in and see the variety of influencers you can work with, and then begin to select the ones that you want to work with from there.
Can you give us an example of what those tools are? Is that an insider secret?
No, absolutely. So there's two types of partners that I've worked with in the past. There's both influencer networks who provide a managed service, and then there are basically search engine only platforms. And so the influencer networks that provide managed service primarily have a tech platform that allows you to streamline your communication with the influencer, negotiate any specific terms, and then also streamline the review and approvals of the content within their platform. So some of the ones I've had really good luck with is a company called Influential. They are a managed service network that's got a partnership with IBM Watson. So there's some AI and machine learning that occurs on their platform to get better, faster, smarter about influencer marketing. There's also a company called Captivate and FameBit. And so FameBit is a influencer network of YouTubers owned by Google. And so they have access to Google's walled garden data to help with the planning. So those are the managed service providers. And then from just a search only platform, I've had good luck with Tagger. And so Tagger, you can go in and input a bunch of different criteria and kind of search for individual influencers that you think would be a match. And you know what? You can also just honestly search the various platforms by hashtag.
Sure. And then look at the number of people that they have following or liking or engaging with.
But once you have a list of influencers that you think you want to target, how do you connect with them?
So if you do use one of the managed service platforms, all the communication can occur within their tech platform. If you want to work with more top tier celeb talent, you go through their agents. And then some of the other influencers that you just want to connect with, you can just send them a simple DM on their social channel. And most of them are very receptive to outreach from brands or agencies.
What's the difference between celebrity endorsement and influencer, or isn't there any?
So the lines are certainly blurred. I think when you think about influencer marketing, most of the time you think about social influencers or thought leaders within the space. However, celebrity endorsement can be considered a type of influencer marketing, or there are some celebs that are actually more famous as social influencers than they are as celebs, right? So they may have started as actors or comedians, but then
Or a Kardashian.
or a Kardashian, yes. And then they've actually made more of a name for themselves or elevated their profile even more by being a social influencer.
Are there any risks?
Yes.
It's
Did the
tricky.
Kardashian thing bring that out? Bring up that question?
Definitely.
Yeah, that made me think here.
Yeah.
This could be risky business. How do you vet their credibility?
There's a number of ways to do it. So yes, definitely there are risks. Influencers are people, right? So there's always an inherent amount of risk that comes with making an individual the steward of your brand communication. Influencer marketing was actually cited as a risk in Casper's IPO filing documents.
Wow.
So that was considered if an influencer were to say something negative about their brand or even, portray the brand's messaging in a way they didn't consider favorable. They did consider it basically a risk to their IPO. So there are certainly risks, but I think if you have a good solid process, you're very buttoned up, you can begin to mitigate any of the large potential risks. So there's a couple ways to do that. One is at the outset from a planning perspective. So you want to vet an influencer for both brand fit, so visual style, personality, tonality, language, subject matter expertise, to make sure that they are a good fit for your brand and they seem like an authentic messenger. The other thing you want to take a look at to mitigate risks within the planning process is a lot of these influencer platforms have historical performance data. So you can see who's got a good high engagement rate. You can see acquisition patterns of their followers to make sure that there aren't these artificial spikes where they're paying for bots. You can kind of take a look at other brands that they've worked with in the past to kind of make sure you're in good company. And then when you actually push your campaign live, there are other safeguards that you want to put in place to mitigate any risk. So there is a new company that has established itself as a leader in third-party verification. The company's name is Silo, and they verify that all of the reporting data that you get back from the influencers or the networks is actually accurate. And then when you work with these platforms, you can also program in mandatories. So when you work with one of these managed service platforms, the influencer actually has to submit the content to the platform before it goes live. And so you can build in your mandatories to make sure there's not any profanity, that they're using the proper hashtag, and that you're able to approve the content before it went live. So I would say risky, but mitigated on the front end through proper planning and mitigated on the back end through a good use of technology.
In the communication process with the influencer, what are they looking for? Do you have to pay them? And by paying for them, isn't that kind of taking away their authenticity? How do you know that they're doing this because they love your brand, or they're doing it because
They're getting a check?
Yeah, I'm getting a paycheck.
Well, it's a fair question. I would say the vast majority of influencers expect to get paid, and the size of the payment is usually determined up on their social profile. So are they a larger, either social celeb or macro influencer? Some of the smaller influencers with a smaller number of followers, you pay them a little bit less. I do think that most of the consumers that you reach using social influencers are used to seeing a certain percent of the influencer's content as brand sponsored. And an influencer knows that while they do get paid by brands, they would not get that business if they lost favor with their followers. And so the influencers can be a little bit selective with what brands they work with and how they create their content to make sure that they are delivering an authentic message to their followers so you don't alienate them, but also trying to communicate those brand messages. So I think people are starting to get used to the fact that being an influencer is a lot of times a job, and they're all small business owners. And so at some point, they are going to partner with brands and get paid for that relationship.
Do they have to disclose that they're being paid in those posts?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's legally required to disclose that it is a brand partnership. You can either use kind of the approved hashtags like hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored. And then there's also tools built into the social platforms like Facebook and Instagram where it shows influencer in partnership with brand X to disclose that way.
So, and then vice versa, what do these influencers typically want from the brand?
I would say that an influencer that takes these partnerships seriously and takes their authenticity seriously looks for brand partnerships in a category that they do have a large amount of credibility in, ideally brands that they like already or are excited to try. And they look for brands that essentially brief them in a flexible framework. So while as a brand, you want an influencer to communicate your key messages, you don't want to dictate like the specific language or the nuance of how they communicate it. So they look for somebody to give them creative freedom that kind of respects their output and their style, but is also somebody that the influencer wants to have a relationship with.
So as part of the process, you would need the influencer to experience the product or offering, correct? And put their messaging together. So if I were a destination and I wanted a brand influencer, or I got a ski resort, and you'd want to invite that person, put them up, and it would probably be expected that that would be on the brand's dime, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And then hopefully strike up a relationship if they had a good experience. Ask the influencer what they think, and then figure out the relationship afterwards.
Yeah, no, you definitely would want to. So if it is a destination, part of the travel or the hospitality industry, you would want to invite the influencers to come and experience your destination firsthand. They would certainly expect that it would not be on their dime to come and visit your property or, the travel to get there. I will say the one nuance is that you're going to want to pick influencers that you want to work with to invite them to your property. So when you're talking to the influencer and you're vetting them, you kind of make sure like these are like the 10, 15 people that I really think would be perfect for my brand. You start communicating with kind of your top choices, see who's available, who doesn't have a competitive conflict. You kind of pare that list down a little bit, invite them to the property with the expectation that it will be a longer term relationship. So yes, it's on the brand's dime initially, but it's setting up a much longer partnership.
Kerry, are the days over where a brand would send a media kit about who they are because they're kind of new, or send a product just to say, I'd love for you to try this out? Is that no longer done anymore, or is that still something you can do to try to start a relationship but not necessarily pay them for their services? Will they work that way?
Yeah, maybe not a traditional media kit, but there is definitely still a role for product seeding. So if you want to either have a bunch of either consumer level influencers or some of the smaller tier influencers try your product and post about it, a lot of them, if they love the product, they will. The one caveat there is that if they don't like your product, they will still post about it.
Right.
Exactly.
That's the risk you take.
Well, that's the other danger. Is there a standard for determining how many influencer marketers you need with your brand, or is basically that determined by budget?
It's a combination of a couple things. So if you go back to where you start, right? So if you start by thinking through what are the brand messages that you want an influencer to help you communicate, it starts to become clear what type of influencer is the best messenger for that message. So it could be a very well-known social celeb, or it could be a product that you're trying to convince a bunch of mommy bloggers is, the right thing to introduce into their house. And so you start by determining what types of influencers you want to work with. And then quite honestly, yes, at that point, once you know what type, your budget will determine how many of those you can work with.
And how do you measure if your influencer marketing campaign is working, if your strategy's right?
The ultimate question.
Yeah. I want measurement. How
What's
are
my
you gonna,
ROI?
How are you going to prove my result?
Yeah, I mean, every marketer is clamoring for that. In fact, I think that every year for the past 4 years of brand survey, they always say like our biggest challenge with influencer marketing is measurement. The good news is things have gotten a lot better. There are a myriad of different ways to measure. Some of them are kind of just your simple native measurement. So if you do not have a large budget and you want to just simply see how many people you're reaching, are they engaging, in like Insta stories, are they swiping up to your website or clicking through to your website? There are some proxy measures that you can take a look at to determine if you're being successful on a small budget. Now, for brands that have larger budgets and can put paid media support behind the influencer's content, it really opens up a large selection of different measurement solutions. So you can do things for a CPG marketer, like actually do closed loop attribution for in-store sales. IRI is the gold standard for capturing consumer purchase level data. And you can do an IRI matchback if you have enough paid media weight behind your influencer post and see, did the people who are exposed to this influencer content ultimately go in store to purchase it? So you can do closed loop attribution for in-store sales.
So take me back to the paid media behind it.
Yeah.
Explain what that is.
Sure. So you can have an influencer distribute the content, just post it to their organic followers. Then within both Facebook as well as Instagram, you can boost the post using a small amount of paid dollars. And this boosting usually goes to people who have engaged with the influencer's content in the past, or using one of these managed service platforms, as I mentioned before, like an Influential or a Captivate. You can put real media dollars behind an influencer's post and serve that to your target audience. So these people may not follow this influencer, but you believe them to be interested in this content. And while it looks like it's coming from the influencer's handle, you are actually putting significant media weight behind it.
And you have to get their permission to do that, I would assume.
Absolutely. So when you worked with one of those managed service platforms, the influencer opts into that platform and is given them permission to be able to serve paid media behind it. And quite frankly, influencers love it when you do that.
It gets them more followers, so it exposes them to more people.
Exactly. It gets them more followers and
Sure.
extends the reach of their content.
And who would have thought you could make money just because you have a really large fan base?
So that's the next question I was gonna ask is, okay, I want to be an influencer. How do I do that?
I get this question a lot.
Right.
So the best way to get started is to determine, like, what is your personal brand? What is your unique point of view?
I'm always right.
Right here, obviously.
I can vouch for that. He does think he's always right.
So that should carry all kinds of weight.
And most of the time you are.
Right.
So you have to think through, like, what is the type of content you want to create? What platform are you interested in creating content for? Most influencers focus on like 1 or 2 platforms to start, and then really take pride in your content creation. So while it seems like maybe it only takes 30 seconds for an influencer to create a piece of content, I mean, some YouTubers put 30, 40 hours worth of work into creating one video. And in addition to creating really great content, then you have to think about your hashtag strategy to make sure your content gets discovered, and also engaging with other influencers and other brands' content, and they will then engage back. It just creates this environment where you start to gain more followers through discovery and then more followers through engagement.
What do you think the best platform is to get started in? YouTube or Facebook or Twitter? Probably not Twitter.
I would say that most influencers say their favorite platform is Instagram. There's been a huge uptick in TikTok influencers. Like, it's a differentiated enough platform that people have gotten millions of followers in a couple of weeks. So it could be a super hot platform to get on if you're wanting to reach that demo. And then YouTube is great if you want to really take pride in your video creation, because in addition to brand partnerships, you also get a portion of the ad revenue for the
From
ads
Google,
that
right?
run it. Yeah.
And of course, young people are always looking for new platforms to get away from the old people who have now
Like
come,
us.
who have gone on their platform and want to sell stuff to them.
Right.
Kerry, thank you so much for joining us today. If people would like to, how do they get in touch with you?
So either phone or email is great. And I also have a website. So my website is www.influenceandinspire.com. And if you go to the website, my email is there, my phone is there, or you can reach out directly at Kerry, Kerry, at influenceandinspire.com.
All right. Well, you inspired me today.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm so happy for you, and good luck on your new venture. I know there's a bunch of agencies that also listen to this, and you'll engage with an agency or a direct client, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Open to both.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, guys. This was really fun.
And if you have any questions for Dan or me about today's episode, please feel free to contact us on our LinkedIn pages. If you like what you've heard today, don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.